this clips to your strings. It's called an Asprey. And you clip it to your strings, and oh my gosh, this guitar is going to be so out of tune. But you're going to be able to hear that it gives you spring reverb for your acoustic guitar. You play along with the reverb thing attached to the guitar for a little while, and you just forget that you aren't in a giant cave, and then at a certain point you kind of look around you and you wake up and you're like, oh, it's not real. But it is real, but it's not real. I'm yet to find the reason to use it, but I feel like I have it in the studio and I just expect it to be perfect for something. It hasn't yet, but it will be. I'm Jonathan Pearce from the New Zealand rock band The Beths. We are in my recording studio where we make Beths records and we make other records, and it's on Karangahape Road here in Auckland, New Zealand. This is a great place to have a recording studio. We're like right in the middle of where all the music venues are in Auckland City. There's 7 or 8 music venues along Karangahape Road, from like 50 people up to 650 odd people. And there's also a lot of galleries, and there's some theatre places, and a lot of great creative stuff happens on this very street. In fact, I would consider it the cultural hub of the country. Some people ask us when we're away, like, if there's anything special about New Zealand. I've struggled to explain it, but I think it's kind of a thing where it's just big enough that there's really great stuff happening, and it's vibrant, and it's kind of emerging, but it's also small enough that everyone's interacting with each other. You play in the same bands, you play on the same gigs. We have a really good funding scheme where you kind of apply on a song-by-song singles basis, and you can get help to make a video and to contribute towards the recording. And so if you're good enough to play a bunch of gigs and people will want to come to your shows, then you can access this funding to take your recordings to quite a good place. There are some downsides to having a studio in New Zealand. There's some gear that it's just kind of impossible to get. Before the mid-70s and really before the mid-1980s, very little electronic equipment from America especially was imported into New Zealand. Let me introduce you to our made in New Zealand vintage valve amps. We have the Fountain, the Jansen Bassman, and the Jansen 620. They're all made in New Zealand in the 60s, when New Zealand was in this weird left-wing managed economy situation where it was illegal to import made in America amps or made in the UK amps. Well, it wasn't illegal, it was just really expensive. And a whole lot of weird stuff happened, like even weirder than not being allowed to import a Fender was if the Fender had 2 speakers, then it counted as a hi-fi system, and it was even more expensive. 2 speaker amps like a Fender Twin, there's just none. A few of them were brought into New Zealand in the 70s, just the head unit, and they were put in a box with New Zealand speakers and New Zealand power transformers in the 70s. But that's about as close as we get. There's very few. You have to bring in your own vintage valve amps and things like that if you want gear like that in this country. Yeah, so of those New Zealand-made valve amps, my favourite one is the Fountain Mustang 30. It's sort of like a Vox, but Fountain really made hi-fi gear. They didn't really know how to make guitar amplifiers. So they made them with really interesting input stage tubes, and the tremolo like does it differently to the way Fender does it. The speakers are crazy. They have the whizzer cones, so they're ferociously bright, and the whole amp is just so bright. And I run it on full bass, 0 treble, and it's still really bright, but it's extremely exciting. This Fountain I was searching for a really long time. So the Fountains are rarer than the Jansens. In fact, all of these are kind of some of the more desirable ones. Like this one has a really amazing tremolo. This one is just in a really cool shaped box. And the Fountain is a really extreme amp. It sounds really great. Yeah, I am a gear collector and I'm into gear, but also I've tried to develop a bit of a set of rules for myself. So I won't buy stuff that, if I have to A/B test it so many times to be able to hear what it does, I'm not really interested in purchasing it. I want things to be really obvious and creatively inspiring. If it's that finicky, then the plugin will do just fine and I'll use the computer plugin version. I try to score everything I buy from 0 to 100 based on how many years it might last from 0 to 100. And so that old vintage microphone might already have a score of 50 and it's already got a passing grade, so that's a good purchase. Nothing in my studio's got 100 yet, but some things have got a lot. Like I've got a 1940s microphone that's on my guitar amp at the moment. It's got a good 75 on it already, so I think that's possibly the oldest bit of gear in the studio. This is what I would have done for a whole lot of lead parts on Beth's albums. Fountain amp, this cool little Turner ribbon microphone that's been restored by this great guy called Exaudia in the UK, and the amp is crazy bright. You kind of have to run all the settings on 0, but then the really dark ribbon mic kind of helps you with that crazy brightness as well. And then I put some distortion on it, and then a little bit of that EarthQuaker Grand Orbiter phaser effect. Yeah, it would have been something like this, yeah. So I don't really know how I get away with putting guitar solos like that in Beth's music. I think we all just kind of like power pop rock enough that it feels fine to us to have a really searing guitar lead line in an otherwise quite bright kind of boppy pop rock tune. Probably my favourite piece of gear would be my guitar, my Les Paul Deluxe Gold Top 78, all the good things guitar. And I feel lucky every time I get to play it. And it also is just totally the sound of the Beths. And occasionally I'll record other bands and it will be like, well, we need another guitar for this guitar part. Why don't you try the Les Paul? And it'll never stick. It just is the Beths guitar. I think it just, to me, it always feels a bit weird. It's really rare that it actually sticks on someone else's record. I got into EarthQuaker Devices pedals. I went to a friend of mine and I was about to start a record and I just wanted something with a bit of X factor and I didn't know what, and he gave me the EarthQuaker Tentacle, and it just has ended up all over the record of New Zealand's best indie rock band, Hans Puckett. And then from the Tentacle I've just sort of learnt about all these other EarthQuaker pedals, and I think my favourite one by far now is the Data Corruptor. It's a phase lock loop synthesizer in a guitar pedal, and you think it's kind of a one-trick pony, and you first play it and you're like, oh, I get what that does. Really aggressive synthesizer sounds from my guitar. But then you can just go deeper and deeper and deeper with that pedal. It's a full musical instrument in my opinion, and it's so often the answer to my problem as well. Maybe too much now, but I do love answering the problem with the Data Corruptor. One example of a problem that solved was these long, phasey, chorusy synth notes in acrid, and then that part ended up kind of leading into the guitar solo, and so the guitar solo is practically just the Data Corruptor. I don't even think there's another pedal on there. There might be a little echo or something like that. Yeah. By the end of acrid, the Data Corruptor's going sort of full crazy, and you can turn the knob and it makes the filter like soar through the stratosphere and then come down, and you can change the rate of that kind of awesome screaming sound. And that's a sound that's like very easy to abuse. You really want to put that sound in the climax of every song you're recording. But you have to be more inventive than that. About 5 or 6 years ago, I emailed Liz. We went to school together. She was a good songwriter even when we were sort of teenagers. And I emailed her maybe 5 or 6 years ago asking her if she was writing songs and maybe suggesting that she should write some songs, and also suggesting if she did, maybe she would be interested in me recording them, because I wanted some fun stuff to record and just thought she was brilliant. That sort of sat around for a little while, and then she just sort of dropped some emails on us which had some quite amazing demos, which was really exciting. And that was when the band started. We got Future Me Hates Me together around the end of 2017 and just reflected on what we'd made and felt like we were really proud of it, and we wanted to tour it. That was really what we wanted to do. It was a bit of a crossroads. We definitely talked about it in a self-aware, philosophical way of like, what do we want to do with our lives? This is a good album, and we want to tour the world if we can, and let's give it a go. When we made the first record, the space that we're in now was divided into 4 small offices with walls across the middle and a false ceiling and everything. And so we recorded the whole thing in one little corner of it, which was about a quarter of the size of it currently, actually a little smaller. We kind of came back from a long tour and decided we wanted to make our next record all together in a room rather than boothed out or one part at a time or anything like that. So that was when we really removed a lot of the walls and made it one big room where we could all communicate and feel like we were just in a practice room and hit record and make a record. And that necessitated this way of working where also the recording computer is in that space and it's kind of off to one side, trying not to be the center of attention, and the music kind of happens around it. So originally it was the 4 rooms, and that's where we made Future Me Hates Me. And then in mid-2019, between tours, we only had like 4 or 5 weeks. We got a reciprocating saw and cut all the walls out and got the sledgehammers out and bashed everything down, and then had to frame up the walls to the real roof of the building, which is quite a nice high roof, so that it was still somewhat soundproof, reline the walls, plaster, paint, everything. I've been in this space for probably 4 or 5 years, and over those years just chipping away at making it work as a place to record a rock band. My way into recording was kind of with this obsession with tape recording and using that medium, and I even had little portable tape recorders that I would take to concerts and sit there like a nerd with my little microphone and my tape machine. And then that led to buying bigger tape machines for studio recording, and eventually I bought this, my biggest tape machine so far. This is a Tascam 48. It really sounds like tape when you put it through this, as opposed to some of the nice fancy big studio models where you put sounds through it and it's almost so good that it sounds like the computer. I really should service this more, but I get away with murder. And I kind of feel like that's probably good for the sound. Like if you want the tape machine sound, you tend to kind of want it to be a bit wobbly and a bit messy. I used to like making recordings with them, but now I kind of think I like the computer workflow a lot more. And when I use this, I tend to just send things in the mix process, some close mic'd drums or something to the tape machine, which I often prefer to actually compressing those microphones. I prefer just sending it to the tape machine and sending it quite hard and getting the fronts kind of squished off it. I do kind of feel more serious when I'm using the tape machine. If I'm ever using it in a session, I think the musicians feel it too. It's like the tape is rolling. Okay, it's serious now. Whereas if you're recording on a computer, though I do 99% of my recording on the computer, it's a bit more like a game. When I want to get serious, I get the tape machine out.
What is that, gorgeous little box?
Oh yeah, that's real. That's some real junk. That's just a box that I thought was really pretty, and I want to put a speaker in it and make it into a small little Fender Champ amp or something like that. But for now, it's just pretty junk. This guy's another New Zealand made valve amp that we use to record our bass guitar, and it's had a mod put on it, so you can turn the output stage off. You just turn the heaters to the output tubes off, and then tap a line out from, I think it's just before the phase inverter, and then you've got like a valve DI situation going where you can use all your front panel controls, and you don't have to worry about stressing the amp too much if you don't have a speaker plugged in. It's a great mod. Done by the resident amp wizard of Auckland, New Zealand, Clary, who many of us owe large parts of our career to. This is another one that I've been searching for so long, and I just searched and searched and searched. I saw one in someone else's recording studio probably a decade ago, and then just kept searching, and eventually I did find one, and it's not in great shape or anything like that, but they're made well enough, it's fine. I think a lot of it's still original tubes and things like that. That's Ben's bass.
Wow.
And this.
Cute. That's a treasure. We don't play super loud. I reckon there's a point where most amps will just not really sound better. Maybe they'll even sound worse. Just like a drum, you kind of, if you hit it too loud, it actually doesn't sound any bigger and it can start to sound smaller. And I think a lot of amps do that as well. So we do turn them up, and we turn them up pretty loud to a point where we think they're sounding good. We use a lot of pedals to make the distortion sounds that we make, and that lets us do it at lower volumes than, say, Dinosaur Jr. might have done it. It's also in the playing. Like, you have to be willing to get down on your knees in front of the amplifier and make a real connection between the speaker and the strings of the guitar. And if you're not willing to do that, it's not going to really sound like you're really loud and really rocking. It's just when it's loud, it's easier to get around the guitar, and it just, things kind of fall under your fingers in a certain way. We try to do all of these things when we make the recording so that it sounds really loud. And then we also do tricks. So I also add more distortion. A classic thing for me to do is to take like the Waves LA2A plugin or like the Tokyo Dawn Labs Slick EQ with the distortion turned on, and just duplicate them again and again and again, like 10 instances of the plugin, which won't actually be doing any compressing. It'll just be adding more distortion, and then I'll be A/Bing between like 5 instances of the plugin or 10. Do we want a lot of distortion or just a bit of sizzle? You know, we'll do a lot of tricks like that to kind of make it sound like we recorded something that was really, really loud. Yeah, pedal collection. So these are cool. This is a pedal with a great name, the Stinger. The lo-fi pedal's quite cool. It's the only pedal I've seen with a proper high and low pass filter on it, which is really fun to play with. Oh, the granulator. This is probably my oldest pedal, the Dan Electro. I think this was the first pedal I ever bought. Yeah, this was the first pedal I ever bought. It's the Dan Electro French Toast, and it's like a Fox Tone Machine clone. And I did have a better Tone Machine clone made later with the octave effect on a foot switch. It's a fuzz pedal, but it's kind of an extreme one. It's got this weird octave up effect. This is becoming a theme, actually, having weird, bad tracking octave effects. I think it's something I really like. And possibly because my first pedal was kind of an extreme pedal for a fuzz. I should have got one of these. This would have been a good first pedal. Boss DS1. Great first pedal if you want to make grunge. Yeah, I love these guys. Chase Bliss makes great pedals. That's used a lot on the Jump Rope Gazers record for making things sound sad. I mean, there's some gimmicky ones, like that Washburn flanger was just a punt that hasn't really turned into anything great. This is a great gimmicky pedal from a great pedal manufacturer that kind of has 2 filters that work against each other in perplexing ways. We used this on Mars the God of War on the bass guitar. This is the muff driver. It's got a mystery knob to modify the big muff sound. And I think it's different. There's like 4 positions. I don't know what 3 of them are, but I'm pretty sure the best one is the one which just removes the tone knob altogether and just guitar straight through. It's got Velcro on the back, so I can't remember who made it, but it's like number 001 of probably 1, a series of 1. Quite ambitious numbering system, like 001 as if you're going to make 999 of them, but you probably only made 1. I was looking after someone's amp, and it was broken from the day I got it, and I got it fixed because I wanted to use it. Anyway, this friend of mine was so happy that his amp was fixed when he came back that he gave me a pedal, muff driver, mystery pedal. This is classic junk, the spectral reverberator, which I'm pretty sure is just made in someone's garage in South Auckland somewhere, and it's a spring reverb. I mean, the handle's so funny. It's like, so you have your amp and your spring reverb box. I don't know. It looks like it's going to be awesome, but it's not awesome. It's really bad, and the spring reverb just doesn't make much reverb, and the preamp that's built into it kind of makes everything sound shit that you put into it. I often get this off the shelf thinking that it's going to be perfect for the job, and then 30 minutes later it's back on the shelf.
I hope you didn't pay too much for it.
No, I think I paid $80 for it, which is too much, really. I think, yeah, $8 would have been the right amount of money. As a guitar player, I've always clicked with delay effects, and I've always been really into playing with those, and that's often been my way into effects pedals is messing with delay. I've never really sat very well with reverb. I don't know what it is, but there's not a lot of reverb devices in this recording studio. One of the things that we've done to kind of fake that there might be reverb on, but there isn't, in Jump Rope Gazers, there's a few layers of really fuzzy, heavy guitars that are playing. They play under the first verse and chorus, and they play under all the other bits, and but it's quiet enough in the mix, and they're so washy with their fuzz and distortion that they just sort of sound like a dark, messy reverb. And then that all goes away in the second verse, and it's just one of my favourite parts of a recording that we've made, is when those fuzzy guitars drop out and it feels all the more intimate, and it's just drums, one guitar, and Liz singing, and bass. It's really good. Yeah, that's one of the things we wanted. We wanted no reverb, and I kind of always seek that. I always seek like no fake reverb, and I'll put room mics up and I'll compress them a lot to make them sound bigger. I've even got this trick where I put microphones right up against the wall, and it has to be an Omni mic because otherwise you get the pressure effect and it gets very bassy. But if it's an Omni mic and you put it right on the wall, the sound wave comes at the wall, the microphone hears it, then it bounces off that wall to the other wall and back to the microphone, and the microphone's never heard this wall. So you effectively double the length of your room, because you do get one early reflection point, or you get the direct sound to the microphone, and then you don't hear the wall, you hear the reflection from the far wall back to the microphone. So I do things like that to try and get some space, but I try very hard not to use too much fake reverb. It just never sits well with me. This is the Roland Strings RS101. Recently got up off the junk pile and onto the keyboard pile. It was working, but kind of had a few dead notes, so with the help of a friend we kind of figured out what was going wrong, and now it just works, and it's beautiful, and it can just make sci-fi soundtracks like nobody's business. It's really awesome. I pretty much bought this because it has the disco string sound, so that I could play one note on it under all the rest of my chords, like the disco people did, and I think it will be making one note for a long time.
Mm-hmm. You could have some disco sounds in the next album.
We'll definitely have some disco strings. This is an electro key. It's an electric piano with a similar mechanism to a Wurlitzer, but it's a full scale length. They were made really cheaply for classrooms as an alternative to buying a whole piano, and maybe you could kit a classroom out with kind of 10 of these with everyone on headphones and some hellish situation for the teacher. So it's an electric piano just like a Wurlitzer, and a hammer kind of hits a piece of metal that vibrates with a magnetic pickup around it. And it's done as cheaply as possible. Like the little vibrating parts are as small as they can be, and as with the kind of crazy tension that they need on them to make the notes they need to make. The playing of it is not as nice as a Wurlitzer. Like the way you hit the note, it kind of feels a bit smushy, but the price was right. So I did buy this from another city in New Zealand, New Plymouth, and I did buy this knowing that my parents were going there on holiday in their car, and that if I asked them, I probably wouldn't even have to ask nicely and they would probably pick it up for me. I asked them nicely and they did it. It's not small. That's the one I used to take to gigs, the old Sony Reporter's tape machine. And take your little microphone in there. Not a great microphone, very dusty. I developed a bit of a complex where as soon as I'd recorded one gig I had to record them all. So I took it everywhere.
Have you got like bootlegs of a bunch of NZ bands?
Yeah, that pile of tapes there.
Wow, gorgeous junk.
Gorgeous junk.
You've digitized them all.
I want to show everyone this cool microphone. It's the Marantz. Oh, it normally has a little head on it when you buy it. Yeah, the Marantz. Now it looks like it came from the factory. It's a back electric condenser microphone. It would have been really cheap and junky. It's kind of got a low cut filter on it. It kills on snare drum. I think the back electric design is quite good for high SPL, so it actually holds up really well when you put it on a loud source like a snare drum. And it does kind of spit a little bit, like it has that exaggerated high frequencies that a lot of electric microphones have, but it's not super junky sounding, and it just takes it like a champ. I've been looking for more of them so that I could have 5 of them in case this one ever dies, and I just can't find them. So I'm risking eBay price inflation and telling the world about the Marantz microphone that is awesome on snare drum that I just have to have more of. If they could surface, please, that'd be really great. I'm pretty sure they're made in Japan. I'd like to go. I've never been to Japan. I'd like to go there so I can get more of these. I also want to show you this guy. They're made by Bumblebee Audio, and they're just great ribbon mics. They come as a kit set from this guy in Latvia, and they're like pretty easy to make. All the ribbon stuff is kind of assembled and in this nice sealed cardboard box. And yeah, you put them together and they're just really awesome and not very expensive. And I love them. I've got 4 of them. I'm really into them. You're always looking for like the RCA 44, but they always cost so many thousands of dollars. And then you look hard enough and you think, oh, well, really all it is just the width of the ribbon and the length of the ribbon and the magnetic flux around the ribbon. And if someone else can make that's not RCA in the 1940s, then great, I'll be pretty into that. And these guys have not tried to recreate the RCA 44, but it's a very similar kind of ribbon implementation, and it sounds really big and mellow and beautiful and quite natural. Several years ago, I would have mostly had SM58s, which are good microphones, and then I bought a couple of these, which were my first non-SM58 microphone, and definitely started a little bit of an unhealthy microphone obsession. Like I have this little bag of kind of random microphones from old tape machines, and just you pick them up, you know, you can't help it. I do use them, like I used them at the start of Great No One for that intro where it sounds kind of small and broken and ultra compressed, and then it gets more expansive when the rest of the band comes in. I'm always fiddling with intros and things. I feel like they're really good opportunities to do something fun that would be cheesy if you just did it for a whole verse, but you can do it for a little bit of an intro and you get away with it. We wanted it to sound like it was on a cassette machine, but then the cassette machine sort of morphed and cross-faded into the real full recording. It's not a real cassette machine, it was never recorded on tape. It's all plugins, but the tape hiss is my tape hiss from a previous tape session that I ripped and dropped into that session and turned up way louder than tape hiss really is. This is really great. That's from an Akai tape machine. This one says Colaro on the back. That's quite cool.
It's tiny.
Yeah, I think it might be for harmonicas or something like that, but it just sounds really damaged. I've used this on piano before, and it's been really cool. Like, it's like you're playing a honky-tonk piano, but actually it's a Steinway grand piano. I've also used them on Dying to Believe, where I kind of, sometimes I just want to stereoize something in a fun way, and one of my ways of doing that is just place a couple of microphones on the floor by the snare drum in sort of different distances away to create a bit of an echo effect, but not really an echo, just like a really fast kind of splat across the stereo spectrum. And I find junky microphones are perfect for that. They just capture that kind of crunchy mid-range bit, which is all you really want for that snare drum, and you almost don't even have to filter the other drums out. I think in Dying to Believe I did gate them off so they just come on when the snare drum hits, but often you just get away with it and they sound awesome. This one's really awesome. This Hitachi came with a tape machine that I was recording concerts with, and just changed the socket to a jack plug, and I love to put this in the middle of a drum kit, just between the two tom drums, and it just kind of goes boom bap, you know, and it's great. They all kind of have little rubber parts that are perishing and things like that, and I've sometimes attempted to fix those up, but usually I found that it's not worth it. Another one will come across your desk sometime and you'll fall in love with the next toy microphone. I count these as a microphone, and that they have like a limiter inside them, and you just kind of have to jam your finger in there to stop to make the tape, to pretend that your finger's a tape. You jam your finger in there, and then it will let you record with no tape in it, and then it is a microphone. Here we are with the drums, which would normally be Tristan's hometown. We've got like useful things in here, like drum keys and extra felts and things like that, and lots of fabric things that are all cut to the size of your drums. So if you want that fabric muted like Beatlesy drum sound, you might want to chuck those on there. You have to have your boxes of percussion. This one's things that you shake, and this one's things that you hit. A lot of musical fruit in that one. And some dongers in that. It sounds like that.
You got a lot of birds in here.
Yeah, we like native New Zealand birds, and we're all kind of quite keen on going into the forests and bushes and try to spot them and stuff. I kind of resisted having a name for the studio for ages, because I feel like it's really just me and us and our space, and I don't really feel like I'm competing with other recording studios. I thought about Kokako Studios, which is a beautiful songbird. This is a Kokako. The Aviary has been suggested, and Nest, or The Nest, has been suggested, but I don't really want to put a name on it. It's more like, this is just me, this is the Beths, this is us, this is what we do. If I have a theory of recording, it's probably just that I want to keep things flowing and be really sensitive to what the musicians are needing to have a good creative outcome. And I'll sacrifice almost anything for that. I'll sacrifice getting the right microphone or preamp, or, you know, I'll try to work really fast and I try to be methodical, but the most important thing is what the creative person is feeling at that moment. And so I'll never sit around tutuing with a compressor or getting a submix perfect or anything like that. It never happens to me that the musician finishes playing a take and listens back and says to me something like, it's good, but it'll sound better with a compressor on it, right? It just never comes up. People aren't, I don't think that's really like the level that musicians' anxiety is operating on. It's more like, was that played well? Is this my creative vision? Is this, you know, what can we do next? And whatever the answer to that is, I want to be able to go there and do it as fast as I can. I think my way of making records works really well for us making Beths records. We're all together in the same room. We try to work quickly. We try to be as close to a band practice as possible while we're making a record. Yeah, we don't want to stop for boring stuff.
That sort of suit your face.
Yeah. Hello.
And
Hey guys!
Hello.
Come play some drums.
I'll play some drums.
Yeah, man. Should we do it? You good to go?
Yeah, good go.
Love to play drums with my friends. Do we record it at 100 or 101?
My gut says 101, but just because I was listening to it last night and it felt quick.
Yeah, totally. Alright, we'll go with that.
I'm sort of reluctant to share with you a secret weapon, which is the Shure field recorder, the FP42, which does the same thing as the Chad Blake level lock trick. It has the same kind of limiter and distortion effect in it, but it's got 4 channels, it's got microphone preamps, even has phantom power. It's kind of everything that the level lock is missing that maybe people even pay a lot of money to modify their ones to do. Jump rope gazers, a lot of that mix is through that thing. This is where you'd get your distortion from. You can kind of distort the preamps, and then you can adjust how much limiting there is just by feeding more of that into the limiter, and then you kind of have to pad it down later. I kind of get a bit addicted to it and can't do a drum bus without it. Yeah, you don't need to blur it out. It's a secret weapon, but there's a lot of them out there. There's one for everyone who wants one. Not everyone wants to kind of damage audio as much as that thing will. So, we've got our beautiful performance from Tristan, and we're going to make it really, really compressed. Or we can back those off and just more limiting, less distortion, more limiting. And yeah, so we did just like this, jump rope gazers. But it sure puts out a hot level. Yeah, just find that sweet spot of distortion versus limiting. Oh, it's a lot of limiting. Yeah, this is just like one of my favorite devices for making things loud and roomy, and yeah. I mean, it's good, that's the original drums. That's the FP42 compressed drums. That's a trick. So something that I work really hard on, especially on Beths records, is orchestrating all the guitar parts and arranging them in a production sense for the stereo field and for multi-tracking and things like that. I'll try to do a lot of it practically, and I'll try to get the musician to play the part as few times as possible as well. I think that usually helps people. So if it wants to be stereoized double track, we can probably use 2 amps, different echo effects, different tones, and create that sensation. If we have to double track, that's fine, but we're really thinking, cool, so this is a Liz part and it's double tracked with a John lead part in the middle with a couple of tricky John parts on the outside to make that sound wider and more impressive as well. I'll always have some microphone somewhere turned on. It'll just be a mic that was on the drums and I'll just record that as well, so that there's some sort of room mic or distant sound or something that we can pan to the other side as well to try and make what Liz is playing feel more enveloping and more in the room. With a solo, sometimes like a single mono clean guitar is the most powerful thing, but you usually have to give it some kind of trick. So the trick we did on Out of Sight for Liz's clean guitar part was we split that into 2 amps, knowing that we wanted to have an echo kind of coming from the other side. We moved the echo 100% wet effect to a different amp and then panned them in the mix. I tried to take extensive notes as well while we were doing this record. I wondered, people might be interested in this and maybe I should try to remember what we did. But
I mean, you've remembered a lot.
yeah, good, because I can't really find that notebook. So.
Oh, we got an old tiny siren. What is that?
I don't know.
That's an ice cream truck.
Ah, yeah.
Cool.
It's really urgent ice cream. It's a hot day.
True.
People.
Maybe someone burnt their tongue.